there's an F1 race, and it's really, really soon. Hi guys, Spanners here. You're listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We've got Matt Trumpets and Jonathan Simon here to preview the Australian Grand Prix. Finally, we're going to have some racing action, and normally I would be spending this time trying to dampen down expectations, because the secret of a happy life, I've learned as a middle-aged dad of teenagers, is low expectations. But I can't help it, because there is potential for this to be the greatest Australian Grand Prix ever. How's that for managing expectations? We've got a field, a third full of rookies who are going to have to be racing probably in the rain. We've got dry qualifying leading into a wet race, and we've got potentially 8 drivers in with a shot of winning this race and then going on to challenge for the title. With us is Matt Trumpets. Hello, Matt.
Dampen. Rain. I see what you did there. You pretend to not like puns, and yet I've caught you at it again.
I didn't do it. I was hilarious by accident. And we've also got joining us from Australia, Jonathan Simon. Hello, Jono.
I was very excited about this week in Spanners, and then today I lost my favorite pair of sunglasses. But luckily, and as sad as I am right now, luckily I won't need them for race day because it might rain.
Are you only going for race day? So you're going to be joining us on the race review panel, but you're going to be at the stadium for the race.
Correct. I'm going to go all 3 days. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday. For Sunday, it's going to rain, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on. But it doesn't rain that often for the Australian Grand Prix, which is what I found out about when I was preparing for this podcast. It's rarely rained.
But the weather forecast is pretty sure, is it, that we're going to get rain on Sunday? And no disrespect to this Australian Grand Prix, it is the spiritual opening race of Formula One. I wouldn't have it any other way. But the amount of times we've been so excited over the off-season, get to the Australian Grand Prix and go, oh right. Not to say that it hasn't had some great races, but I definitely vote for... If there's a vote, I vote for rain, if there's going to be a vote.
Well, the contract for the Australian Grand Prix is until, I think the current contract's about till 2037, roughly. It's been reported as 2035 as well. I don't know, keeps changing per report. But because they're only allowed to host it, or the season opener 4 more times in the next 12 years, the compensation for that was bringing Formula 2 and Formula 3 over. So that's the bonus now as a Formula 1 fan. When I was younger going to this race and growing up, I never got to see F2 and F3. Now I get my opportunity in the Southern Hemisphere. I know it's been around for a few years already, but it's back again. It's actually like a real ripper of an event.
So that's
400 plus thousand fans, might break a record again.
So what's the support series then? So you've got F2 is going to be there.
F2, F3, you got supercars. I'm pretty sure Porsches are there too. I don't think there's anything else from memory. I haven't really bothered to look that deep into it.
So I assume, since this is Australia, that all of those cars will be on track at the same time in the same race?
With kangaroos as well.
And wallabies. Oh, no. I actually drove past 15 wallabies today, and I was like, well, that would be interesting if they made their way onto the Grand Prix track somehow this week. But anyway, I'm real excited, Spanners, and like you said, the weather forecast is picking up. I don't know when you want to talk about that, but it looks like more and more likely by the week that it is going to rain. I know in F1 it's normally the standard where we predict rain, and then it never comes. And this occasion it keeps getting more likely, which is good.
Tell you what, we're going to do some predictions so that we look nice and stupid by the time Friday comes around and Red Bull are clear up ahead, and we've all said that they were going to be the 5th best car. But there is some news, and it is Australia related. So I guess it's sort of breaking news. It does warrant the news bumper. Big Dirty News. So it is about Oscar Piastri, and Oscar Piastri was re-signed by McLaren with a year to go on his contract. Normally, these kind of things, if there's any doubt, we don't get told about it until the end of the season. But by signing it at the beginning of the season, it dismisses any doubt at all through the season that they're going to be looking for anybody else for 2026. It sends a clear message that Piastri is seen as part of the future, and sends kind of a hands-off to the rest of the grid. Now, bearing in mind, we do have Jono here, and I'm just going to assume that there's an Australian bias. However, I asked the question on our Missed Apex Tik Tok, what do you Piastri fans see that I'm not seeing from his results, from his level of competence against his teammate, what are you seeing that makes him one of the most sought after drivers on the grid and that is making snapping up his contract a must do on the Zach Brown to-do list?
I'm going, okay, so reportedly it's what, like £20 million per year? I don't know. That's from a source that I'm not even going to mention
Wow,
because they're
that's big.
very unreliable.
Wow.
But it's a lot of money, and it's reportedly until 2029. Now, I don't know how true that is, but if that's the case, that's some real good future investment in Oscar Piastri, who Mark Webber, his agent, got to be voted agent of the decade. I mean, Oscar Piastri was supposed to be driving an Alpine, now could be fighting for a championship in a McLaren. Mark Webber, whose agent, can I just mention, was Flavio Briatore at one stage in his driver career. So he's learnt from basically the best, the godfather, Vito Corleone himself. So I think it's a great deal for Piastri, but I don't know what this means for Lando Norris. Like, my only nitpick, if I had to pick something here, is he the right guy to push Lando? Like, Lando right now is I don't feel like he's pushed him last year. I feel like he pushed him a couple of times, but not enough. Now, if we've seen the best out of Lando Norris, what's going to push him to a world championship? He's just. Do you get what I'm kind of saying here?
Yeah.
Like,
well, okay. So let's establish a baseline here, which is I agree with you. I don't think he pushed Lando Norris last year. Obviously, he got some results, but that happens when you're in a top car. So, you know, Bottas won some races in Mercedes. Perez won races at Red Bull. But no one's rating Perez or Bottas as, you know, the top drivers. So I had a lot of people saying, oh, he won 2 races. What more do you want? I said, well, being a lot closer to his teammate consistently, putting together that sort of Sunday race pace across a range of different tyre conditions. I think that was something we've immediately flagged. But the main argument, Matt, that I've gotten from people is that Piastri's got more potential. But he's already been in F1 for 2 years. Like, I don't remember we used to give drivers 2 years and then say, oh, they've still got a higher ceiling to go.
Yeah, this is one of these complicated arguments, because really, I think if you want to fully understand what a driver possesses, I think it especially with these regulations, you need 2 years. The cars are so much more complicated to drive, and F2 doesn't do a great job of preparing the drivers because a lot of the tools you get in Formula One aren't available to you in Formula 2. Never mind, the cars are like 12 seconds slower as well.
Give me an example.
Mid-entry exit differential settings,
That's
brake balance, brake shapes. Like there's, I think they have some of the basic tools, but a lot of the more advanced tools and all the different maps and stuff like that, they don't have those as much. And then the other thing, which you've really hit on here, is the Pirelli tires themselves are always a moving target, and being able to extract the maximum. If we look at how McLaren performed across the past season, where we saw Norris always strongest was in the final stint at the end of the race. And that is the thing that Piastri is still, I think, working to master. Now, obviously, McLaren think he can do it, but he's not done it yet.
And he's not done it yet. This is another big argument that people have said, because it's really a lot of comments in this TikTok, but they've said, yeah, but he's fast. No, I don't disagree. He's going to beat us all in a go-kart. He's fast. Fine. I get that. I accept that. And I think any given Saturday, it's a bit of a toss-up, I think. I think Norris has been better in qualifying, but Piastri could beat Norris any given qualifying. But we were able to pick out ahead of time and go, we think this tyre wear is high, therefore that's going to suit Norris more than Piastri. And it worked out a bunch of times. Unless I'm just misremembering, I'm just going, yeah, I'm such a genius. I got that right all the time. But we had people in the comments saying, well, if he just sorts his tyre wear stuff out, then he'll be, because he's already fast, sort the tyre wear out and he'll be just as fast as Norris. But that does sound a lot like saying, yeah, if he just ran the race faster, he'd be faster.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like saying if, anyway, you got there basically. If Carlos Sainz was better than Charles Leclerc, he'd beat Charles Leclerc anyway.
Yeah.
We won't get into that.
If I practiced really hard at chess, I'd have been much better at chess.
But it doesn't look. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter for Piastri whether he beats Norris, and here's why. It's for McLaren. I'm saying here in that contest, they want someone here. They're happy with the lineup. This is what this signing shows. He's not a disruption. The lineup's working at the moment. Lando Norris and him together. They had any controversy they had last year. Like, remember Hungary when Piastri won? Like, that was sorted out. It got controversial, but it kind of ended up like being okay at the end of the day. Piastri was okay supporting Norris towards the end of the year. So I think, McLaren have shown they have faith in him. He's a mellow guy. He doesn't seem like he causes much controversy. And you need one mellow guy in a two-driver relationship to make a two-person relationship work. He was so mellow, he didn't even let his mum know he was signing the contract extension. She tweeted out saying, well, this was a surprise. You didn't tell me at breakfast this morning. That's how mellow Piastri is. He's not even breaking those rules.
How important is Australia to our overall audience here, Spanners?
No, here we go.
It's a fair chunk, Matt.
And panel members too, as well.
All right, well, whatever. I'm not worried about you.
And look, you're going to get hammered in the edit as well. Remember, if you slate Australia too much.
No. And this is not meant to disparage Australians, actually, who are some of my favorite people in the world.
Too late.
Thank you.
This is true. But it just came to me as you were talking about him not being a disruption. What if McLaren have decided he will never quite be as good as Norris, but will be like a slightly worse Rosberg was to Hamilton at Mercedes?
Which is perfect.
That's okay.
If he's compliant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's if he's never quite going to get there, but he's going to be able to score, 48% of the points compared to Norris's 52%, then isn't he the perfect person to have on long term?
And you think they had that in the contract negotiations, and they were saying to Webber, what have they told Mark Webber?
I think Webber paid his buddy Christian Horner, because remember, he used to race for Red Bull, $10 to say on Netflix, I'd have Oscar. And then they duped McLaren into spending stupid amounts of money on Oscar instead of making a better car.
Matt, did we talk about this? Because I made that exact same observation. Right? No, so Drive to Survive, and I think Horner and Red Bull are pretty tight. And I think on more than one occasion they've run the Red Bull narrative fairly one-sided. And I think this season of Drive to Survive was no exception. But yet they did this. The whole narrative of that was Norris is mentally weak, which is a line Red Bull pushed. Red Bull have pushed that line. He's mentally weak to disrupt it. And then they did the big question: who would you take, Oscar or Lando? And he looks dead into the camera. Oscar. And then they had about 8 other people saying Oscar. And then they had a picture of a cat that meowed, but the subtitle was Oscar. Like they really painted that narrative of course, it's universally known and accepted that you would definitely take Piastri over Norris. I'm not seeing what people are seeing.
Nah, I would take Norris too. No doubt about it. And I would take a mentally weak Norris over what Piastri's shown. We just saw mentally weak Norris lose a championship, and he was still better than Oscar Piastri. And I know, Matt, you were talking before about getting used to the F2 car. I know compared to the compared to F1 and all that kind of business. But like, he's had enough time. How many drivers in F1 have come in, and in year 3 you've gone, oh, okay, now he's a world championship talent. Now he's 5. No, look, all of a sudden he's become Michael Schumacher. Where did that come from? They've been like that from like their first or second race. Like barely any drivers come in and change their talent over
we should challenge ourselves on that, because that's quite a romantic notion that I also share. So what you've just said, I agree with you. Like, I think, we don't really see the Lewis Hamiltons emerge in year 3. Like, we knew Verstappen was inconsistent, but we knew what he could do.
But he was mega,
away. Yeah, he was mega. Yeah. And you're like, he's mega, but he's smashed into a car again.
For 3 years as well, he smashed into cars, or 4 years.
Yeah. But it was without, like, there was no debate over how good Verstappen was initially. So I'll give some examples, but then these are less rated drivers. So Tsunoda seems to have taken an uptick in his 3rd or 4th seasons. Norris probably is a example of that himself. And Leclerc maybe too. No, Leclerc was really touted right from the beginning. But remember, Leclerc was losing to Vettel at Ferrari initially.
Before races. And then by race 5 Canada, Vettel gave up on his career because of the whole pit board incident. I'm not going to give context.
Good memory.
And then after that, Leclerc wiped the floor with him basically for the rest of his time at Ferrari. Same with Norris. Like, Norris came into McLaren and I thought he was pretty good, from the get-go. So look, In future now, and I kind of brought this up with you guys before the podcast, but what does this kind of mean for the driver market now for the future? Because you've got basically McLaren's locked up, Ferrari's locked up with Leclerc and Hamilton. So now, with the Mercedes deals coming to a close this season, both contracts, if they then sign Max Verstappen, that means George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, they only have one place to go to win races again, that's going to be Red Bull. It's going to have to be a swap if Mercedes go for Verstappen and buy him out of his very long Red Bull contract.
Okay. I will say we've got 7 or 8 new drivers. What more do you want? Like we've had the big driver transfer thing. Like we've had it. You've already eaten your cake. You don't need more cake. But yeah, Russell's vulnerable, I think. There could be a space at Red Bull. Lawson will be vulnerable as well. I think he's only got a 1-year contract too. But I was hoping one of you was going to come out to bat really hard for Piastri there. The comments in the YouTube, we'll address them. We'll do YouTube shorts as well if you want, and I'll reply to the comments here. I literally just want to know what you have seen from Piastri that would make you go, he is now a better driver than Lando Norris. I think the argument I like the least is that there's an extra hidden ceiling that hasn't been unlocked yet. The only good argument for that is at the beginning of 2024, he's still in his first 13, 14 months. Maybe this season he can get a better start and get more momentum behind him and get the team around him a bit more, get the car tweaked and developed around him a little bit more. But in general, I'm not buying that argument.
So I want to say 2 things. First of all, regarding Piastri, if you want a positive argument for why you might take him over Norris, all things being equal, I would just point to the move into the, turn 5 at Monza. We've given Norris a lot of stick as to how he's raced Verstappen, and the way Piastri races, I don't think we'd be having these same arguments that we do with Norris. Number one.
Norris claims that he didn't know that move was sort of a thing that could happen. And he says, the quote was, if I thought that was a thing that would happen, he wouldn't have been able to do it because I could have defended. So he's basically saying, well, I wasn't defending Piastri because I didn't think we'd be racing like that.
But the fact that he made that move, and we've seen him make other moves like that against people, I think argues to more of this is a wider disparity. But remember, we used to talk about like Bottas and Hamilton and how they raced. And I think it argues to how Piastri races that he might have an advantage, sort of that intuitive move advantage that we sometimes see certain drivers have. So I would definitely make that argument for him.
And then you can say, well, Norris as well has lost out a lot on lap 1s. So maybe that gives Piastri the edge. And by the way, it's easy to interpret. What I'm saying is Piastri is not good. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about between Norris and Piastri.
And that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's basically like, let's clarify YouTube comments. We're not saying Oscar Piastri's crap. We're saying he's a really, really good driver. We're just trying to see who would you pick between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri in the title fight. My answer to that, just before I go to you, Matt, is wait for race 6. Wait for like May this year. And if one of them has like a 1 race advantage over the other, that's your answer. I think it's pretty tight between the two, but I still think Norris, like we said, I don't think we're going to see Oscar Piastri year 3. Wow, where did this come from? He's Juan Manuel Fangio. I didn't expect this from Oscar Piastri. He's going to be the same as last year. There's going to be no difference.
Yeah, and you wouldn't expect year 3 Lando to beat year 7 Lando or whatever it is. But I also just need to make a point about like the margins we're discussing here. Like if you say, okay, they both had a good race. They both maximized where they could finish. They finished first and second. What was the time difference between them, allowing for maybe they didn't go as fast as they absolutely had to? And you just calculate out the percentage difference. It's like 0.05%. We're talking incredibly fine margins here. But that's what makes champions.
Want to go back? There's definitely more news. I think we should go back to the Australian Grand Prix. We don't have a Sunday's amount of time. We're recording this during the day. Oh, my God. And Jono, it's already like 2:30 in the morning for Jono. And he's not allowed to complain because I'm bravely going to be getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch the Australian Grand Prix. But it's a tradition. It's a tradition. I love when Australia was the opening Grand Prix, especially. I used to love it with my babies. I'd get up and I'd be the hero because I'd get up and do the morning feed, rock the babies, and I'm just watching the Australian Grand Prix, but I got the credit for being a good dad. Oh no, it just happened to be the Australian Grand Prix. So it's a tradition. As much as I might complain about it, I do love doing that. We will be doing our live stream around 8:30 a.m. UK time. Obviously, for those of you not getting up for the race, catch up with us later. And it's going to be too early. I'm fearing it. I fear it. So let's go to Matt. What should we be looking out for? Australian Grand Prix, track, tyres, weather. Let's do that.
All right. So the easiest and simplest thing is to start with the tires. It's the C3, C4, C5. Last year was mostly a two-stopper for everyone with one medium tire and one hard tire, and two hard tires, making the rounds. There have been some small changes, I think, for the 2025 tires, and there's been a little bit of circuit reprofiling around turn 6 curbs. And I think really the bigger thing is going to be the fan experience, which I know Jono has been looking at quite a lot.
Well, there was an Instagram post the other day, 55% more shade. That's groundbreaking. No, I'm not being, that sounded sarcastic, but it actually is, because it's going to be very sunny. Saturday was supposed to be 37 degrees, like stinking hot, 37 degrees Celsius, which is like 98, 99 Fahrenheit for our US listeners and whoever uses that unit of measurement. Anyway, 22% more super screens is the other thing I saw in the Instagram post, which is important because if there's anybody listening who's never been to a Grand Prix, my first couple experiences, it is so essential to have a screen in front of you while you're watching the race from the track, especially if you don't have a grandstand seat. But the one I'm very disappointed in is 17% more toilets. Now, it felt like there was only one toilet last year. So is that like 1.17 toilets this year in 2025? Like, I feel like it needs to be like a 1,000,000% increase. Anyway, that is the crucial update I will give on Sunday. First up, forget the race. I'll let you all know how long I had to wait for a toilet break. But it's good, and the credit to the Australian Grand Prix, like I know a lot of people who work on this event and they really value fan feedback. They do it, in my opinion, as good as any other Grand Prix out there in the world, and they really incorporate what people want to say. They put in a new pontoon you were talking about as well, Matt. Of course, the overpass too, to just make people, bump into each other less. But the track invasion, that's my favorite one that's come back. I used to set like world records. I used to get right in front of the podium like before any other fan. I'm telling you right now, watch the races from, I think 2018 was my record, or 2019. And then COVID happened. And then after that, I just couldn't, I don't know, for some reason, too many people came and I just struggled to get like right near the podium. But that became a full on like mission for me. I studied that to a T. And it is one of the funnest things of an F1 fan is to storm the track after the race.
I have to say, there's a great series that the track has put up about putting the event together. If you're a logistics fan at all, it's on YouTube. You should go find it. That's where I saw them putting in the new pontoon bridge, talking about doing the curbs at turn 6 and stuff like that. But what really struck me is they have a very clear idea of what they have to deliver on, from the basics all the way to the premium things, to make it a better experience year over year. And the director was talking about how it's a challenge being in a public park because you do start from zero, but that also gives you the ability to reimagine things year over year in a way that it's much harder for a permanent facility to do. And having been to Grand Prix now at Miami, things like, is there a huge traffic jam to go across the overpass to get someplace? It becomes a really big deal. And the fact that they're thinking about it on a year-over-year basis probably means it's one of the better events to go to as a fan. That said, the top comment there was, you guys need more toilets. So you may be onto something with your reporting there, Jono.
No, 100%. And then the other thing was, I can't remember if you mentioned it, Matt, but the pit lane exit line, this is actually a big deal. Restored to the 20. It was reported as 2018 configuration, but I think that's wrong. I don't know who reported that. It's the 29 configuration. And it's basically like the pit lane exit. You will see when you watch the event, if what I'm reading is correct, it'll be a lot more fatter and wider. It's basically going to be almost more than half the width of the front straight. So when you're coming out of the pit lane, you could almost go 2 or 3 wide. Like that's how wide this pit exit line is going to be, if that's what I'm understanding from this. If you watch the 2018, 2019 race highlights, you'll see what I'm talking about when they exit the pits. Now, I know that's not a massive deal, but we've seen some slow cars come out of pit lane in qualifying. We could see the order change on pit exit. The blend line's very long, so I think that's also kind of could play a factor as well. And most importantly, no DRS changes, because this track, for some reason, is perfect and doesn't need like help overtaking. Like, isn't this one of the worst tracks on the calendar to overtake at? Like, shouldn't they have extended DRS to the whole circuit?
Well, they basically have. If you look at the DRS map, there's only 2 DRS zones, but they both have a corner in the middle of the DRS deployment where you can then redeploy after you get through the corner. And that's because there's no long enough straight for DRS to actually let you catch and overtake someone. Generally, you catch them right at the corner, then you have to catch them back up, and then you still haven't passed them. And then you're at the next DRS detection point. So it just makes the race go faster, I think.
All right. So we are going to have to put our reputations on the line here with some predictions, but we can delay that by saying, okay, you said there was more on the weather. I think is it a case of like Canada? If it's raining, chance of a good Grand Prix. If it's not raining, it's pretty much gonna come home, unless there's a safety car. It's gonna come home in a procession.
Well, if you look at history, like we had 2010 wet start, changing conditions, really good race, like one of the best races of the decade. Jenson Button capitalizes, wins in changing conditions. We haven't really had another wet Australian Grand Prix, surprisingly, in however many years the event's now, almost 30 years. I think 2003, there was like heavy rain before the race, and it was like, some people allege it was a damp start. That was pretty much dry at the start of that race. So I think, for like, imagine seeing like a wet Australian Grand Prix, full wet start to finish. We could have a classic. Like, we had a classic last year. What was it, at Brazil? I can't remember what track it was. It was one of the best races I'd ever seen.
Oh yeah.
We
Brazil,
could see that again.
Yeah, we could. And like, this genuinely does have the potential to be the most exciting Australian Grand Prix ever. I'd dampen those expectations.
Yeah, well, you think Brazil, but then also remember Spa, where they just drove around behind the safety car for half an hour, said some points were handed out, and then everyone sat around for 2.5 hours waiting for the race to actually end. So hopefully it's not that much rain.
Yeah, well, the kind of rain is really important for my predictions as well. So I got pretty upset, and then I got yelled at for being upset about this, about Sonoda in Brazil. So I don't know how much attention you pay to this, but while all the rest of the drivers were complaining on the radio about the intermediates, oh, it's too dangerous on my tyres that are not at all the correct tyre to be on right now, Sonoda and a couple of other drivers went in, got wets. Sonoda's pace was incredible. It was get to the front of the pack incredible. It was massive pace advantage, and then suddenly everybody else would have to go, oh, we shouldn't have just been whining on the radio. We should have gone and got our wets. And when they eventually do, come out behind Sonoda, incredible. That he made the right decision, and the red flag just completely robbed him of it. So I really wish Formula One would get to a point where that crossover point is it later, so that you should go on to wets when you need wets, or are we going to go down this path of anytime you need full wets, it's either a red flag or we don't start the race? Because it's pointless at the moment. We never get to that crossover point. So that, though, full wet conditions, if it's on that borderline, that suits Verstappen. I don't care how bad that Red Bull looks or how scruffy it looks. If it's even close to full wet conditions, my prediction will be Max Verstappen, even if he qualifies 8th. I think Verstappen's reputation as the full rain master of those full wet conditions is pretty formidable at this point.
Hard to argue with that. We don't really know how the car is going to drive, but it's going to be a good enough car, and you'll be going slow enough that I think the margins where it becomes problematic won't show up in that level of rain. If it's less than that, if it's like sort of, if it is proper inter conditions or inter to drying conditions, it could get really fascinating. And I just want to chuck in there. I get your frustration with the crossover point, and they're working on new wet and intermediate tires. But a lot of the issues is visibility becomes impossible about the same time the wets really enter the neighborhood where they work. So one of the things they're working on is like a super enter that will work deeper into wetter conditions, but not the same crossover as the current full wets.
Yeah, super inter. That would be all right. But if the conditions are, and this is why the amount of rain is important. And so I think, Johnny, you were saying that when the rain comes in that area, it's big rain. Is it big old fat rain?
Well, today actually, I went to the basketball grand final near Albert Park, like 5-minute driveway. Started lightning, thunderstorms.
Oh wow!
And it just came whoosh, like just came massive rain, and it just went within 30 minutes. It's not normally like that in Melbourne. The weird part about Melbourne is it's just like light sprinkles. What it looks like on Sunday, it looks like it's going to be heavy rain up until the start of the race. We could even see a delayed start, so you might not need to wake up as early. We'll see. But it could be that situation as well. So you don't actually know. And just one more thing on the weather is it's going to be so hot on Saturday, like I mentioned, for qualifying. The hottest part of Sunday for the Grand Prix will be 2 a.m. It's only going to get cooler for the rest of the day. That's how the temperature change. This might not be the race where we get to understand the pecking order, because the temperature is going to play such a big factor. We might find out the real pecking order of the grid the week after in China.
Yeah, you always need a real racetrack to figure out which car is actually the fastest, because this is a street circuit. We've talked about that. But I'm looking at your predictions. If it is up closer to that 37-degree mark, we will be into the declared heat situation by the FIA, which means that the cooling stuff for the drivers will be mandatory. And that's never been fully done before. So we could have a really interesting case in qualifying on Saturday that they'll be required to run that extra cooling equipment, which adds 5 kilograms to the minimum weight of the car.
Yeah. Now that is significant, actually. And I've just been sort of reminded again. We did talk about that of, Russell in those heat conditions. In Singapore. And you go, if we can avoid that, I'll take the extra 5 kilograms. I don't need my F1 drivers to be boiling the bag superstars. So lingering on the intermediate conditions, if we get that downpour drying off because it's going to be hot enough to dry off a quick thunderstorm, isn't it? It's going to be hot enough that you're going to get that wet going into slicks. And they're the conditions where I think like Lewis Hamilton starts to come into play. They're prime Lewis Hamilton conditions. If we do that, the best Lewis Hamilton condition seems to be, and I can't put my finger on why, consistent middle of the road intermediate conditions. He seems to just not wear his tires. And a lot of people maybe overheat those. I don't know what knack he's got there, but if you're going in from the intermediate conditions into drying conditions and then waiting around for rainstorms, a little bit like we had at Silverstone, then you get into the gambler's territory as well, and you've always got that person who's going to pull the trigger. So could this be the 1 in 3 George Russell gamble that comes off?
Which we've seen before.
Yeah,
2010 Jenson Button. Basically, he came in. And for anybody who doesn't remember that too, he came out too early on the softs. Different to what you were talking about, Spanners, but basically it was dry at the time. He came out in the softs, ran off the road, and then everybody said, "Oh, well, it's too wet to put dry tires on." And then literally a lap later, he set fastest lap, then another fastest lap, and everyone's like, "Oh, wait, he just made one mistake, and it was actually the right tire to be on." So you never know, and it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be very, very interesting. But I'm not kidding. I just refreshed my page, and the weather changed. It's now 91% rain for the start of the race. And so it looks like it's going to rain well into, like, if we get a race start and it's not too wet, we're going to have a proper first half of the Grand Prix is going to be intermediates or wets. without a red flag, for God's sake. Hopefully we don't have that. So I'm excited, and I'm really excited too because I have grandstand seats, and I want people to boycott and just say, I'm not going today, it's too wet, which means I can lay back and raise my feet and just enjoy it, chuck a poncho on, and then we'll be all good.
Oh my goodness, Jono outing himself as a cheap seat merchant there. Just buy better seats, bro. Get invited to. I only go when I'm invited to the paddock club, which was that one time.
No,
on a Friday.
I'm not famous
on a Friday, limited access.
You're too famous for that now. Oh, I'm not. So yeah, get me in on who you know, and then I'll get there.
There is potential for it to be a red flag disrupted race then. So that's something we all need to schedule for and be patient for. Have they done anything about the rules where you can just put new tyres on in red flags? Is that no? It's the same. Yeah, it's a real killer because whatever strategy was playing out, it's gone. So now it's just luck as to whether the red flag comes out at a time that suits your strategy or not. Why not? I don't get it. Why not just neutralise it? There's a small safety argument to go, well, if you're going back out in the wet, you want everyone to have new tyres. I don't know. Well, it punishes people for doing the right things, and it's just too random for me. But then what would you do? Okay, I'll argue with myself. Fine. What would you do if you had the red flag and it was wet, and then you started again and it was dry? You can't have everyone go out on wets.
Well, I was talking to Chris Stevens about this the other day, Missed Apex podcast member, of course, beloved member. And I basically said to him, well, if you change your tires, now I know this is kind of what you're saying, anybody who makes a change to their car in red flag, it should be a back of the grid situation.
Yeah. Oh, maybe,
now, if all 20 change, let's say it's wet and then it becomes dry and all 20 need a change, that nullifies the effect of going to the back of the grid because everyone's changed. So we all just stay in the same positions. That's how it should be.
I would even go for, if you put on the same specification of tire, you can keep it, because fundamentally the pit stop is to satisfy the two different tire rule that all cars have to satisfy during a race. So if I start on the softs and there's a red flag, I can put on new softs. But if I put on a different tire, a medium or a hard, then I have to go and start at the back, because fundamentally I'm skipping a pit stop now.
Is it even worth doing predictions for a dry race at this point? It doesn't feel like it is.
I think we should do wait, I have an idea.
Okay.
I have a really good idea. We can do predictions for a dry cool race, a dry hot race, a wet hot race, a wet cold race. And that way we can literally predict everybody on the grid wins. And somehow at some point we'll be right about it.
Dry, hot race. That's what we're going for. And my prediction for a dry, hot race is Lando Norris with fire in his belly. Everybody is calling the McLaren as being the fastest car. So out there, 1-2 on pole, is going to not yield to Piastri. He's got to have spent the winter going, Piastri, he smiles, he gets his round in, nice bloke, but he's the right git on the racetrack, and whatever is said in the meeting rooms beforehand, he's going to try and get past me. He's going to block me for all his life is worth. So I've just got to fight him. So semi-prediction then. Both McLarens crash out, but my most likely one is Norris wins in the dry. All right. You can't nod on that. Guys, we've been doing this.
I was waiting for
Jono
do
predictions.
To go,
12 years we've been doing this.
I refuse to do predictions. I don't do predictions.
Okay, well, in that case, Jono, what's your predictions for qualifying?
I'll tell you one prediction I'll have, if you want me to make one, is Sauber's going to be last. And I, by the way, can I just point out, Nico Hulkenberg, Gabriel Bortoleto are signed to that team multi-year. What the hell is going on there? I would be calling my agent tonight, and if they don't get me out of that contract, I'll be calling Mark Webber tomorrow to become my agent and get me to a Red Bull or a top team.
That's really interesting. I think you're saying it's a buyer's market, but it's a seller's market, or the other way around. So I think both those drivers are probably pretty pleased to have gotten on the grid at all. So I don't know where Bortoleto was going to go. Hadjar had that Alpha Visa Cash App seat wrapped up really early when he accidentally gave it away in a F2 press conference, and so that was when we knew that Perez was definitely going to be out for the season. So I don't know where Antonelli was already. It had before the start of the season, Antonelli and Behrman had their seats. So Bortoletto's probably just happy that he's in F1.
No, of course.
I imagine he must have some backing. I'd imagine. I know he's F3 and F2 champion first try.
No.
That's great. But he'll have brought some backing to get a stake seat. I'd imagine everyone would need to. And Hulkenberg would be your driver that you would bring in as a steadying factor, as a known entity. Quick question for you. How old is Hulkenberg without looking it up?
37.
37? 30,
Yep.
That's properly old. 37 is properly...
Apparently he's signed to the team until 40,
Yeah.
one report said.
So that's great
So
for him. I'd imagine he's picking up a salary, and that's a pretty good life. And he's just going to run that out and have a brilliant time.
What I said was tongue in cheek. Obviously, they're happy to be on the grid and stuff. But Jonathan Wheatley was just announced a few hours ago. He's going to start as team principal in 3 weeks. But my word, what a shambles! They've fired 2 of their most important guys. Now Wheatley's come on board. Jonathan Wheatley, for context, great guy. Matt convinced Michael Massey for a full season in 2021 to not follow the rules. He must be a very good team principal. I think that's a good pickup for them. I'm buying back in. I'm back into Sauber next year. I'm back into Audi just because of Jonathan Wheatley.
No, they're 100% finishing 10th next season.
They are. But if I'm Bortoletto, I don't mind. It's actually probably the best possible place to be as a rookie on the Formula One grid. Is the worst team that gets almost no attention anyway. You can just learn your craft and get on with it. Plus with Hulkenberg, if he even runs him reasonably close, if he's within 2 or 3 tenths in qualifying, if he's able to maintain, finish the race within 5 or 10 seconds of Hulkenberg, then he looks like a genius. And that drives his market value up while he's placed. Well, if he doesn't do well, he can just blame the car and the team, which everybody's already doing anyway. I think it's actually for Bortoletto, he's got the best deal in terms of ease out of all of the rookies because he's got the least pressure.
I mean, Hulkenberg's good, isn't it? I don't think people say he's a genius if he just clings on to Hulkenberg. I think he's got to beat him. I think if you're F2 champion and you're coming in, you're stamping your mark at the back of the grid, go beat Hulkenberg and everyone will go, good, job done. I think if you don't at least look ahead of him by the end of the season, like you're consistently quicker than him at the end of the season, people will go, what? Because Hulkenberg's a little underrated, probably. I think people will go, maybe he should be a bit better than Hulkenberg by the end of the season. But, unless you're Piastri and you get 4 years to prove your potential.
This is my point. He just has to be within shouting distance in the worst car on the grid, and everyone will be like, at least they'll take a second look at him. So, obviously, if Logan Sargent said he's done anyway, but
just got to keep it out of the wall. So what's going on with Jonathan Wheatley? Clearly some residual feelings from Jono there. Get over it. Get over it, loser. It's 2021. That was 18 years ago. Jonathan Wheatley was doing the best for his team and was playing the referee. And I'm sure that Sauber will hope that he does the same for them and fights their corner just as hard.
That's why I'm buying into Jonathan Wheatley, because of those radio messages alone to Michael Massey in 2021. Gaslighted him like I've never heard before in this world. No, of course. He was stating the rules well and clearly to Michael Massey at the time. Good luck to him. And, he starts in a couple of weeks. Just letting you all know, by the way, F1 fans listening to this, guess who's interim team principal?
No, I was going to say...
Harry Potter himself, Mattia Binotto.
I thought Binotto was team principal, so that's confused me. I thought he was going to be the boss.
Yeah. Well, apparently now he's confirmed, he's interim and Wheatley's coming in. No. So that, I think you might have misread that. No. I think it was always planned to be Wheatley. It's just obviously Wheatley's now taking it up earlier because I think he was supposed to come in later in the year, like towards the end of the season. And they basically said, okay, Mattia, your time's up. You've only got a couple of weeks left. And then Jonathan's taking over. Mattia will then go into more of a technical role, which is what he had at Ferrari and what proved to be so successful when he was at Ferrari too.
Yeah, no, I'm fully on board with Wheatley knowing the regulations better than any other team principal. If someone had to argue for me with the stewards and with the referees of fact, I would certainly want it to be Jonathan Wheatley because he's proved he's extremely good at it. But the larger issue here is all of this movement underlies the uncertainty around Audi's entire project, given the prevailing economic conditions for the car manufacturer. And this is fundamentally what we've seen multiple years of lack or underinvestment in this project. So they're now significantly behind. They're like Williams level behind when Williams got sold. And you've seen how long it's taken them to, oh, wait, yeah, they're still trying to come back from that. So they're either going to have to be sold to someone, a very deep-pocketed buyer, maybe a Chinese manufacturer, BYD or Geely, possibly, or they are going to continue just to be a marketing presence at the back of the grid because it's going to take a huge amount of money to catch up. And I'm not sure. And I'm not sure what Audi really know what they want to do. That was just why I'm sitting here just like going back and forth, is because it's just the whole thing has been shambolic from early on.
All right. We all agree 10th place in the season, 10th place over the season, or the 10th best car is going to be the Snake F1 car. We all seem to agree with that. And they even lost their best livery crown because I don't know what's going on. I don't know.
They changed that green. Why?
Yeah. They were clear of the rest of the field for best livery last year. It's changed. Anyway, whatever. What about 9th place? Who have we got 9th? Like I've got a list in front of me, and I really upset Meg earlier on the ringer because she's predicting 6th place for Williams, and I'm putting them 9th. So because here we go. All right, come on then. Here we go. And this is nothing against Williams. I just think that their mission, do well in 2025, is A, really, really difficult with the resources and facilities they've got, and B, it's not actually their primary ambition. Vowles has risked everything on 2026. I don't think he's going to waste a single second of wind tunnel time or development time that could be going to 2026 on this 2025 car. So even if they start off okay, they're not going to develop. They are not going to develop this car.
But it doesn't matter because they're going to score enough points in the first couple of months to get them through the year. So I don't think they're going to be 9th. You know, like I don't know how many points 9th place scored last year in the constructors, but and this happened with the Haas. Do you remember, Spanners? Like back when Haas began, they kept having a car that was really good to start the year because they basically borrowed a lot of Ferrari products and all that kind of stuff.
No, that was a characteristic. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And then their key was how many races could they score good results from to begin the year, because you knew that car was going to be very, very bad towards the end of the year because they don't develop it. So I'm with you on that front, but I think the car's too good. Like, I genuinely believe, now I'm not saying they're going to challenge the top 4, and do I need to clarify who the top 4 is anymore? Do F1 fans know that? Okay. So they're the 5th best at the moment. If anyone's happy to disagree, that's, you know, in my opinion, from what I've seen in testing and
you think Williams are 5th best?
I think from what I've seen, they're pretty good.
Oh, you're crazy.
Yeah. What?
Okay.
Go on,
have
Matt.
I been looking at different lap times, or am I completely off the... What have you guys seen to say that they're not 5th best?
Go on, Matt. Matt, go on. Where do you put Williams, Matt?
All right. So this is interesting because I'm going to include Aston, because Aston haven't convinced me about anything they're doing this season yet. I will give them the first 2 races, and then I'll figure out where they really are. Testing told us nothing about Aston. But what I've noted is that of all the other 4 teams, Haas and Williams are, Williams actually has the driver pairing most likely to score double points. And I think because so much of the bottom half of the field is noise, because if you can finish 11th every single race in the season and score 0 points, and if you finish 10th in those same 24 races, you've scored 24 points. So there's a lot of noise relative to how good the cars are. But I think Williams had given themselves the best chance to advance with their driver pairing. The question is, have they built a car that will really finish any better than last season? Because remember, they were super quick in qualifying.
Yep, they scored 17 points last season. And I do, do you remember how often they would come like 3rd in FP1 or something? And everyone was, is the pace real? is it real this weekend? No, it's the same as all the other weekends. And I think that there is an element of that in testing. I don't think they're trying to do glory runs or anything. I think they just run their low fuel qualifying setups more than other people. But I'm starting to doubt myself now because Jono's saying P5, fifth best team.
No.
Meg was saying sixth best team. Jono says they're going to win the championship.
Okay, well, I did say that. No, I didn't. No, of course. But I look, I'm all about like basically knowledge, and I don't make predictions because predictions are ridiculous. Like you
just did.
I have no idea who's going to be quick. I just made the prediction that Sauber's going to be last. I'm pretty sure. Hands up, we can all agree on that. But from what I've seen, like I said, I looked at testing times. I know testing times ridiculous to look at, but you can kind of gauge a feel. Like
Vibes.
I would not be surprised if Williams scores a points finish in Melbourne. Like, is that ridiculous of me to say?
Do you know what?
And a points finish in Melbourne means they're a fifth best car, pretty much, or sixth, like around there with the Astons. I don't think that's ridiculous.
Or it's higher.
Depends on how many cars finish the race. Can I just put that out there?
Of course. Yeah. Of course. But I'm saying, if let's say we were driving on rails, and I wouldn't be surprised if, Sainz managed to sneak a point.
Well, I want Jono and Meg to be right. And, I want me to be wrong. I just think they're not going to invest in this year. But there's such good vibes coming out of Williams. The Carlos Sainz signing. Valve just seems to be saying everything correctly, even if he's not supposed to. So I've got them ninth. And I had because I've got Haas, Williams and Stake as just a clear bottom three in my mind. I think if either of those teams jumps out of that significantly, that is a miracle season. And that is like, wow, that's almost like a championship winning season. But I had Haas ahead of Williams just because I just got a good vibe from Komatsu, and like they're going in the right direction, Matt.
Well, the thing to consider is if you look at how they did in the 2024 season, they spent all of the 2024 testing, driving around, pounding laps, and working on their tire wear. And guess what they did in testing this season? Exactly the same thing. So no, we didn't see a lot of changes to the car, but they don't necessarily have to be. Again, at that end of the grid, if they can improve their tire wear and usage considerably, that's worth a lot more than a whole bunch of brand new aerodynamic parts that only work on some circuits. So I put Haas and Williams actually is sort of my favored teams, Aston being a total question mark. And then I think with Visa and with Alpine, you've got essentially one driver. You've got real rookies in the other one. And if you look at how Alpine managed to score their sixth, it was because they had the 2-3 finish in Brazil. And what did they have? Two very experienced drivers in conditions that completely negated the engine penalty they're going to be suffering. So I don't put a lot of stock in how Alpine are going to do, except for I think both drivers will have the upgraded chassis we saw at the end of the season. Clearly that mattered a lot to them. But the rest of it, as far as I can tell, is just window dressing for a fire sale.
Well, Australian Grand Prix then, 4 a.m. UK time. I don't think this is one you can't set your alarms for. I mean, you might even have to set your alarm in the US. So I think that's even... what time is it for you,
I think it's
Matt?
like a midnight start,
midnight
maybe?
for you. Me and Jono...
we've already sprung forward, so
right,
it's...
So me and Jono will be there. I think Brad will be joining us as well. Be sure to tune in. If you're one of the good fans that's setting your alarm and then wants to watch our live stream afterwards, we won't waste too much time. We just got to wait for Jono to get back. So I think about 8:30 UK time. Just a bit of news to end on, which is Cadillac suddenly is sort of active and vocal, and they seem to be directly responding to the Missed Apex episode where... Matthew Carter was talking about the deal not being sealed yet, which I think would have surprised a lot of people. I think everyone thought it was a done deal. There seemed to be more agreement in principle. But it's fair. It's down the line enough that Graham Loudon, who was the former Marussia team principal, is now in charge of Cadillac, is starting to talk about driver lineups publicly. And it's interesting that he said, well, there should be an American presence and a experienced presence. We're going to have an American so that you feel represented, Matt.
I could look at lots of Formula One teams and say they haven't picked the best person for the job.
No,
they
it's
picked the
normally
person
money.
who brought the most money.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't expect that Cadillac will be all that much different.
All British teams have to have a British driver. That's the new rule. So 7 teams on the grid all have to have a British driver.
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
the last time there was a US team that wanted a US driver was, anybody remembers USF1, was supposed to be the 13th team of the 2010 grid.
Oh, no.
Never even made it to the start of the season. They folded due to financial issues. Of course.
Vaporware.
Yeah. Well, Graham Loudon, he's also kind of, I don't know if he specifically named drivers, but I know like the drivers in contention, you got Colton Herta.
No, he said
name.
6. He said the 6 that are in
the
contention.
6. Okay.
Yeah.
So then, basically, those 6 were Herta, Perez, Bottas, Mick Schumacher, Zhou Guanyu, and Nikita Mazepin. No, just kidding. It wasn't Mazepin.
You got me for a second.
But I could have said that, and it would have been believable. Who was the 6th though? I missed that one. I don't know. I have to look up that up because I didn't see him name the actual drivers.
Can I just say
I'm going to Google it right now.
It's not that inspiring, that lineup. So I know Herta is seen as a talent, but well outside of F1. So it's a sideways move into F1 that we're not accustomed to seeing. Is that fair, Matt? As good as he might be where he is.
Yeah, I think there are IndyCar drivers. There are other IndyCar drivers that people would suggest would be better. Palou and Pato Award, both. I think I would choose, but I think one of them is sort of committed to the McLaren side of things. That would be Pato, and I think Palou has sort of ruled out Formula One altogether, or at least for the foreseeable future. So Herta, fast hands, a lot of talent. Bit crashy, he might come over and do really well in qualifying and poorly in races, and maybe that's enough for Cadillac. Like, I don't know. I think they're more concerned with getting what am I trying to say here?
American advertising hype.
Yeah, maybe, but they want people who can give them good feedback. So maybe Herta can give them good feedback on the car because they just want to show up and roughly imitate what Haas was able to do when they first came on the grid, which is not finish dead last.
Okay, but if they're saying an American plus experience, Herta, Perez as your lineup, that the grid is not quaking in their boots at that prospect.
Can I just point out as well, that Graham Loudon is Zhou Guanyu's manager? So have we just named the lineup that it's going to be Colton Herta? He's going to get his super license, which is going to cost him like €10,000 because he's not been in the sport. And it's probably going to be Zhou Guanyu because he's his manager.
Is that right? Oh my goodness. And there's marketing potential there. That's like, from a marketing point of view, I suppose you've got China and the US market to attack. Yeah, I don't think the rest of the grid is going to look at that with anything other than casual awareness. I don't know if that's... But none of the other names on there are going to make anyone quite... Bottas is your standout driver on that list.
Yeah. He's had his run.
Yeah. You could argue
He's had his run in it.
So anyway, I'd love to see Cadillac just go in, no, we're shooting for the very top of the grid. That is a grid there, or that lineup, it doesn't scream ambition, would be my concern. So we're all really pleased about a 12th team coming in, but if the drivers they're aiming for are a reflection of where they see themselves on the grid, what value then?
My only counterpoint here is that Frank Williams regularly fired world driver champions the next season. So maybe they're just planning to build a good car and they just want a safe pair of hands to achieve the average result they estimate.
Well, Frank Williams and Patrick Head, didn't they call their drivers light bulbs? They could just take one out and put another one in. So for the Australian Grand Prix race review, we're going to take Matt out and we're going to screw Brad back in. But go and follow Matt at MattPT55 on Blue Sky and X, and Jonathan Simons. Links will all be in the show notes below as well. You can follow me. I'm the best one. And we will see you bright and early on Sunday morning. But until we do see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast. Well done, Jono, for staying up late. You're very brave. I'm sure you'll say the same for me on Sunday. I'm probably just not going to sleep. Just roll out of the club and into the shed.